Ukraine recently scored a serious hit against Russia, taking out a top brigade commander in Donetsk and dealing another big blow to the Kremlin's military leadership in the process. In the days that followed, total chaos had broken out across the area, with the Russians appearing increasingly desperate, clueless, and confused in their actions. Here's a closer look at what happened. In a Telegram post on August 11, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces confirmed that it carried out a successful frontline strike on a Russian command post. Its target was the 85th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. Ukraine's defense forces continued to destroy command posts of Russian troops. The latest target was the command post of the 85th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces in the temporarily controlled territory of Donetsk region. According to preliminary data, as a result of a strike with a high-precision weapon, the brigade commander with the call sign NEPA and 5 members of the operational staff were eliminated. More detailed information on the consequences of the strike is being clarified. While the post didn't state exactly where this happened, live and mostly accurate maps of the conflict show that the 85th Brigade is currently stationed near Klishchiivka, a small abandoned settlement controlled by the Russians and right on the front lines, just a short distance east of the city of Konstantinovka, which is believed to be one of the Russians' next top targets. Taking out any commanding officer is always a big win for Ukraine, as it can have numerous knock-on effects on the units left behind. Without cool heads and clear leadership to guide them, troops are more likely to make mistakes or act rashly. Younger and less experienced soldiers typically end up taking over leadership duties, but they may lack the authority and acumen of those that came before them. And with Russia having already lost so many soldiers and officers at all levels over the course of this war, it doesn't always have ideal replacements standing by to fill empty, important roles. The death of the brigade commander also comes at a critical time for the Kremlin. Right in the middle of its large-scale summer offensive, the country is committing colossal amounts of troops and resources to this effort, launching record-level drone strikes on Ukrainian towns and cities, while also conducting near-constant frontline assaults in a bid to capture as much territory as it possibly can. Yet Russia still doesn't have a whole lot to show for its efforts so far. It continues to lose staggering amounts of troops and pieces of equipment. It continues to suffer the effects of carefully planned and perfectly executed Ukrainian strikes along the front and deeper into its territory. And it continues to gain only the smallest spots of ground at a veritable snail's pace in most areas. Now, having struggled to make gains and suffered serious attacks on their commanders and command posts, Russia's frontline forces seem to be slipping into a state of chaos, particularly in the area around the Donetsk city of Pokrovsk, not far from where Brigade Commander Neper was taken out. Pokrovsk is one of the largest cities in the Donetsk region, once home to more than 60,000 people before the war began. It's a vital target for Ukraine to hold on to and Russia to capture, since it's an important transport hub for the region with numerous road and rail links extending across Donetsk to other towns and cities. Ukraine has used those links to transport supplies across the area to other places that are under heavy assault, like Konstantinovka and Chasiv Yar, which has since fallen to the Russians. Nicknamed the gateway to Donetsk in Russian media, the capture of Pokrovsk would give Russian forces a powerful platform to fortify and utilize for further attacks across the region towards 2 more large cities that are still under Ukraine's control for now, namely Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Controlling Pokrovsk would also help Russia disrupt Ukrainian logistics, limit the flow of supplies along the eastern front, and perhaps even provide a springboard for attacks into the Dnipropetrovsk region. That's why, for several weeks now, Russia has been pouring resources into its Pokrovsk offensive, with an estimated 111,000 soldiers in the area, according to Ukraine's Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrskyi. And while the Kremlin has made some small gains, capturing various surrounding settlements and villages, it's thus far failed to overwhelm Ukraine's defending forces in the city itself. But pressure is building, and Russia is throwing everything it has at the city. In an update on operations from August 11, the spokesman for the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Andrei Kovalev, said, In the Pokrovsk sector, the enemy has made 35 attempts to push back our unit. The enemy is using its numerical superiority and losing personnel on a large scale. It's trying to infiltrate in small groups through the first line of our positions. By decision of the Commander-in-Chief, additional forces and resources have been allocated to detect and destroy enemy sabotage groups penetrating beyond the defensive line. 35 attempts. That's a much higher number than almost anywhere else along the front line. For comparison, in the same time frame, there were just 13 attacks in the Kursk area, 6 in the southern Slobozhansk direction, 6 more in the Kupiansk area, and 4 in around Siversk. The evidence is clear. Russia is desperate to take Pokrovsk, no matter the cost, but is persisting with the bizarre and chaotic strategy of using small group assaults here and there in the hopes of catching the Ukrainians off guard and somehow sneaking through to claim key territory. It's not working. As the General Staff report notes, according to preliminary estimates, in this direction, our soldiers eliminated 64 and wounded 38 occupiers, destroyed 1 unit of automotive equipment, 21 UAVs, 1 communication antenna, and 1 motorcycle. They also damaged 1 cannon and 2 motorcycles of the invaders. That's more than 100 Russian troops either killed or injured and numerous pieces of hardware wiped out. But still, the Kremlin continues to throw more soldiers into the meat grinder. Often, these soldiers are given zero armor support, since Russia doesn't want to risk losing more of its tanks and armored vehicles, having already seen thousands of them wiped out by Ukraine's missiles, mines, and drones. The soldiers, therefore, have to attempt to infiltrate a fortified city on foot or riding the likes of motorcycles and quad bikes without any real cover or protection. It's no surprise then that so many of them are wiped out well before they enter the city. Those that do manage to make it in are having to resort to increasingly odd tactics to try to survive. Just recently, for example, reports emerged of 2 Russian soldiers wearing civilian clothing and hiding out in a house in downtown Pokrovsk. An image of the 2 was shared in a Ukrainian group chat alongside the caption, "Watch out, these are Russians." This is an increasingly common tactic, according to Ukrainian Deputy Commander Ilya Petrina, who said in an interview with The Telegraph, "We witness Russians change from their military clothes, even changing into our uniforms. We find Russian military clothes in areas where we know they were." Petrina added that his troops have also intercepted Russian radio communications and overheard the enemy talking about using disguises to blend in. It's a strange strategy, but it shows how the Kremlin is ready to try absolutely anything to take Pokrovsk once and for all. After seeing so many of their small assaults prove to be unsuccessful, it appears that some of the remaining Russian commanders in the area may have finally decided to try something different. Live maps of the conflict show an unusual and unexpected movement of Russian forces north of Pokrovsk. Units like the 5th, 9th, 110th and 132nd Separate Motorized Rifle Brigades are currently sitting in and around small settlements like Fedorivka and Zatishok. Some units are continuing north, while others appear to be concentrating their efforts westward towards the city of Dobropila. Elements from the 4 aforementioned brigades have captured several settlements east of the city over the last couple of weeks, and numerous media sources have reported a Russian breakthrough in the area. This could be Russia's way of effectively encircling Pokrovsk, cutting off supply lines to the Ukrainian forces in the area and preventing any reinforcements from arriving before moving in to take the city. However, once more, it appears that Russia's tactics have fallen flat. While the country's forces have captured some small settlements, their attempts to take Dobropilya have so far proven unsuccessful. And as mixed reports emerge from the area, Ukrainian Lieutenant Colonel Viktor Trehubov has set the record straight in a Telegram post on the Armed Forces Stratcom channel. Over the past 24 hours, information has appeared on various media about an alleged breakthrough by Russian troops on one of the front lines in eastern Ukraine. This information is not reliable and does not reflect real facts. As is known, the Russians used the tactic of infiltration by small groups past the first line of defense, losing a lot of personnel, which happened near Dobropilya. A small enemy group bypassed Ukrainian positions and tried to hide in our rear, but the defense forces are repelling such attempts. A similar situation occurred a week ago with the passage of a small sabotage and reconnaissance group in Pokrovsk, which did not end successfully for the enemy. Whether it's in Dobropilya or Pokrovsk, Russians continue to send in these small and relatively weak assault squads time after time to no great effect. They seem to be hoping that they can eventually sneak enough soldiers through, disguise them as locals or even Ukrainian soldiers, and then launch some sort of surprise strike from within. But Ukraine appears to be well aware of the enemy's plans and one step ahead of them, fending off the small group assaults and weeding out any Russians trying to hide among their ranks. Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has also responded to Russian movements in the Dobropilya area. In a video addressed to the nation and the wider world, he stated, "Today, our military delivered reports about the Frontline, especially Dobropilya, Pokrovsk direction. Steps have been taken there to correct the situation, and I'm grateful to every unit and every one of our warriors who are now destroying the occupier." Zelenskyy, along with various analysts, experts and media sources, has also pointed out the importance of the timing of Russia's latest assault, mere days before the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, is set to sit down with US President Donald Trump at the Alaska 2025 Russia-US Summit. In an August 12 X post, Zelenskyy wrote, "I am grateful to the leaders of Europe for their clear support of our independence, territorial integrity, and precisely such an active approach to diplomacy that can help end this war with a dignified peace. Indeed, we all support President Trump's determination, and together we must shape positions that will not allow Russia to deceive the world once again. We see that the Russian army is not preparing to end the war. On the contrary, they're making movements that indicate preparations for new offensive operations. In such circumstances, it's important that the unity of the world is not threatened. Issues related to the security of Ukraine and Europe are discussed by all of us together. Any decision must add to our joint security capabilities, and if Russia refuses to stop the killings, it must be held accountable. As long as they continue the war and occupation, all of us together must maintain our pressure, the pressure of strength, the pressure of sanctions, the pressure of diplomacy. I thank everyone who is helping. Peace through strength." On the same day, meeting with journalists in Ukraine, Zelenskyy made clear his view that Russians were desperately trying to make gains in a bid to strengthen Putin's position at the negotiating table, stating, "Groups of Russians without equipment have advanced about 10 kilometers in several points. Some have already been found, partially destroyed and partially captured. We will also find and destroy others in the near future. The task of this advance is clear to us. By August 15, to form a certain information background, especially in the American space, that Russia is moving forward and Ukraine is losing territory." On Wednesday, Trump and Zelenskyy participated in a virtual summit with various European leaders and officials, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof. The summit appeared to go well, with Macron stating, "Trump was very clear on the fact that the US wants to obtain a ceasefire at this meeting in Alaska." The US president has also been outspoken in his assessment of the situation, issuing a stern warning to Putin and suggesting that the US would impose very severe consequences on Russia if Putin failed to agree to a ceasefire deal. Trump also stated he plans to use his first meeting with Putin to set up a second meeting that will also include Zelenskyy, stating,
There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting which will be more productive than the first.
At the same time, the US president appears unwilling to continue dealing with Putin if the Russian president continues to be evasive and unhelpful. Trump said,
"Now there may be no second meeting because if I feel that it's not appropriate to have it because I didn't get the answers that we have to have, then we're not going to have a second meeting."
Zelenskyy, meanwhile, while sharing the stage with Friedrich Merz at a recent news conference, claimed that Putin was bluffing about having any interest in peace, saying, "Russia is attempting to portray itself as capable of occupying all of Ukraine. That is undoubtedly what they want." He went on to say that there was little point in holding talks about Ukraine without Ukraine's participation, before outlining a series of demands. He argued that trilateral talks need to take place and a ceasefire agreement must be reached, with security guarantees, truly reliable ones, for Ukraine's future. He also wants any possible agreement to stipulate that Russia will not be allowed to block Ukraine's path to joining alliances like NATO or the European Union in the future, adding that sanctions and other punishments on Russia should be strengthened if Putin once again refuses to end the fighting, summing up by saying, "These are effective principles. It's important that they work." For now, the world watches and waits to see what will come of the talks between Trump and Putin. And while many hope for a ceasefire and an end to the bloodshed, Russia's actions on the front lines provide little cause for hope or optimism. It's clear that the Kremlin is not just maintaining the pressure on Ukraine, but arguably becoming even more aggressive and chaotic in its actions, spreading its forces out, capturing various villages and settlements, encircling major cities, and doing all it can to gain ground, presumably to give it more power at the negotiating table. This has long been a part of Putin's strategy. Indeed, earlier in the year, around the time of the Istanbul negotiations between the two countries, Russia ramped up its attacks on Ukraine like never before, with civilian casualties seeing a 50% increase from the previous month, with over 900 injuries and more than 160 deaths. April was even worse, with over 200 civilians killed and more than 1,100 injured. Recent months have seen even more aggression. June saw a 3-year high figure of civilian casualties with 232 deaths and 1,343 injuries as Russia intensified its drone and missile strikes on numerous towns and cities across the nation, with Danielle Bell, head of UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, stating, "Civilians across Ukraine are facing levels of suffering we haven't seen in over 3 years. The surge in long-range missile and drone strikes across the country has brought even more death and destruction to civilians far away from the front line." July was even worse. Not only did it set a new record for drone attacks with more than 6,000 in total, but it also took the civilian casualty count even higher, with 286 deaths and 1,388 injuries across 18 of the country's 24 regions. Again, Danielle Bell was forced to paint a grim picture of the situation for Ukraine's innocent people. For the second month in a row, the number of civilian casualties in Ukraine hits a new 3-year high. Only the first 3 months after the Russian Federation launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine saw more killed and injured than in this past month. She went on to add, "Whether you're in a hospital or a prison, at home or at work, close to or far away from the front line, if you're in Ukraine today, you're at risk of getting killed or injured by the war. The risk is significantly higher than last year, and it continues to rise." The numbers of casualties make for harrowing reading and demonstrates how ruthless and cold-hearted the Kremlin continues to be in this conflict. Possessed by his pursuit of power, Putin is prepared to stop at nothing to get what he wants, no matter how many lives it costs. But the facts of the matter are clear. Ukraine is still defending nobly. Russia still isn't taking those big important cities it needs to truly push on and gain valuable ground. And the war remains in a state of stalemate, with no signs of anything changing anytime soon. And because of that, Putin isn't the powerful negotiating position he wants to be. He can't simply demand Ukraine hand over entire regions and huge swathes of land, and he may soon face even more serious consequences of his actions if the talks with Trump fail to bear fruit. And that's not the only bad news Putin is facing right now. Check out our recent video to learn of a possible upcoming coup against the Kremlin by disgruntled military officers, or enjoy our breakdown of the Russian Navy's recent series of disasters. And finally, be sure to subscribe to our trusted channel too for more news and developments from the Russia-Ukraine conflict as they happen.